This video was brought to you by Squarespace. You know what though, $80 for a video game is ridiculous. It just is. I mean, there are people who will argue that maybe video games should cost more. Prices have not risen enough to account for rising development costs, inflation, and all that. Maybe there is an argument to be made that $80 is not too high for a video game. The thing is, though, when none of your competitors are pricing their video games at $80, then yes, $80 for a video game is too much. Especially when you are working purposefully with underpowered hardware. Your games are not that impressive on a technical level. Like this is not the kind of new ground you want to be the one to break. Just like wait for GTA. Just wait for GTA to disrupt the whole conversation and then go from there. But just don't be the first one out the door. But Nintendo's thinking with Mario Kart World was probably, this is the #1 most important game that will ever hit the Switch 2. It's going to sell very well for the life of the Switch 2, so they wanted to kind of future-proof that price, especially considering the economic situation. You're looking at 6, 7, even 8 years down the line, the rest of the industry probably is going to be pricing their games at $80 and maybe even more. Nintendo probably didn't want to raise the price later, so they thought they would just start at $80 and they would be good. And then even further, just considering the economic situation of 2025, they probably assumed that other game companies would be raising their prices. I think they were kind of betting on it. And it's funny because Xbox almost did until they chickened out. And now the Switch 2 has been out for over a year and no, $80 games have not become a thing in that time. I think $80 games are inevitable. Maybe it'll even happen soon, but at least right now, at least until that happens, $80 for a video game is going to feel ridiculous. But despite this ridiculosity, we knew that if Nintendo was willing to do it once, they would definitely do it again. The next $80 Nintendo game was certainly on the horizon. The question has been what and when. That's two questions. The two questions have been what and when. On the one hand, you've got the fact that they only priced Mario Kart World at $80, not even something like DK Bonanza, clearly a very, very big, high-budget AAA game. Even that was only $70, so $80 didn't really seem like the new standard or anything. But then, on the other hand, the economic situation is only getting worse. Pressure is only increasing. Their bottom line is only shrinking. So Nintendo may be feeling pressure to lean on higher price points sooner than later. They may see it as kind of a necessity. There was certainly a chance that we wouldn't see another $80 game for maybe even years. Maybe the $80 for Mario Kart World, maybe that was something of an experiment and they would wait until it kind of did become more of an industry standard before they tried it again. Yeah, maybe it would take a few years, or at the very least, they would probably just wait until the next very, very big game that they knew was going to sell a whole lot of units. I mean, Pokemon Winds and Waves, it's definitely going to, it is definitely 100% going to be $80. But that's like partially a Nintendo thing, partially a Pokemon company thing, whatever. But even for Nintendo, Zelda, the next Zelda is going to be $80. Not sure about Ocarina of Time remake yet, but at the very least, the next big original mainline Zelda is going to be $80. The next 3D Mario might, for sure. Again, it's partially future-proofing these games that are just going to keep selling and selling and selling for years. But then also, these are the games that Nintendo spends the most money on. These are very high-budget things that would probably push them to want to price higher, for sure. But even then, that means we're looking at, I don't know, late next year at the soonest, whether it's Winds and Waves or 3D Mario. Yeah, probably gonna be like holiday next year before we see the next $80 game, unless Ocarina of Time surprises us. That's more or less what I've been thinking. I'm thinking, okay, it's inevitable, but it probably is gonna take a bit, right? That's why after the June 2026 Nintendo Direct, when Nintendo gave pricing information for Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, to say that I was surprised would be accurate. If one wishes to purchase a physical copy of the Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave game for the Nintendo Switch 2 system, they must pay an MSRP of $80 here in the US. Yes, $80. Now, to be fair, this is not strictly an $80 release. It's $70 for the digital edition. Nintendo is making good on their promise that going forward, Switch 2 games are going to be priced differently digitally versus physically. Generally, there's a $10 split. It's not strictly speaking an $80 release, But for about half the audience who buys physical versus digital, it is. It completely is. If you don't count Switch 2 editions, which are kind of like buying a base game plus DLC, then Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is Nintendo Switch 2's next $80 game. Its second $80 game after Mario Kart World. And I mean, Nintendo loves to surprise us, right? Oh, they're the kings of left field. They're so full of surprise and shock and wonderment and whimsy. I could have run this simulation a million times and never landed on a timeline where Nintendo charged $80 for the next Fire Emblem game. So before we get to my thoughts on the matter, I do have some thoughts, a few little tiny thoughts. We do have to ask ourselves, just why? Just how and why? Why is this the timeline that we find ourselves in? Before we continue being befuddled and slightly disturbed, a quick reminder that this video was brought to you by Squarespace. Maybe you need a place to host your second-hand wheelbarrow storefront, or your collection of interesting-looking hard-boiled eggs, or your epic, ongoing, dark fantasy Saved by the Bell fanfiction. Whatever it is, whatever you need it for, Squarespace will make building your website a breeze. Every step of the process is easy with the intuitive builder. No coding required, the learning curve is just about non-existent. If you want to make it mega easy, you can even start with a template and just plug in all your own stuff. However you go about it, you will soon have a real nice looking website, good enough for personal or professional use. Me? Oh, my needs are few. I run a basic blog, and Squarespace makes it easy to draft up a bunch of posts all at once, schedule them to publish at later dates, and it'll even generate social media posts for me. So helpful! I can always peruse the built-in analytics if I want to see how my site is doing, and if my site ever needs more juice, Squarespace offers lots of cool extensions. To try out Squarespace for yourself, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. Then when you're ready to launch, head to squarespace.com/Arlo to save 10% off your first website or domain. Thanks again to Squarespace. Now you may continue being like, what's going on with this $80 thing? The primary argument that I have seen bandied about is that Nintendo is pricing the game at this price because they know that the audience will buy it anyway. They believe that Fire Emblem fans are so dedicated that no matter what, they will shell out any amount of money to play the next game. And I do not see this. I do not see it at all. I do not understand it. Fire Emblem games are not immune to bad sales. The series was basically on life support before the 3DS titles hit. Those games revitalized interest in the series, and then momentum was pretty darn good. Three Houses on the Switch sold very well. It was a series best, but then Engage came along and sold about a third of the units. It probably wasn't seen as a failure by any means, but like still 1/3 of the units of Three Houses. And you know, there's maybe a number of reasons it didn't review quite as well. It sounds like it didn't go down quite as well with fans. I mean, I, for one, loved Three Houses, but I wasn't super into Engage. The gameplay was pretty okay, but just like the overall style and the story and everything, it just didn't really do it for me. And I think that that was the case for a lot of other people as well. Maybe it could be argued that as long as Fortune's Weave is good, as long as it's better than Engage, then maybe you could imagine that it will sell pretty well. Maybe something almost as well as Three Houses. Maybe, possibly, but you're talking about a series that was niche for a very long time and then had kind of a breakout moment. It really had its time in the spotlight with Three Houses. But the thing is, you cannot expect a series to be able to repeat that success over and over again. There's absolutely a chance that Three Houses was just the right game, right place, right time, you know? You cannot just assume that every Fire Emblem game is gonna sell really well from here on out. You cannot assume that now you just have this like legion of fans who will shell out any amount of money for every single title. It does not make any sense at all. Even hardcore fans are gonna have a hard time paying $80 for a game. That's a $20 increase over the last one. 70 is already kind of a hard pill to swallow, but if you're a physical collector, 80, like that's just, it's just ridiculous. So no, I do not believe for one second that fans will buy it anyway. A group, a percentage of very dedicated fans will, but we don't know how many people that is. And as I'm always saying, I believe that with a smaller series, you need to grow the series. You don't just cater to the fans. You want to price it a little bit more competitively so that it can reach broader audiences, better for the long-term health of the series. I've also heard the argument that this price makes the collector's edition more appealing. Like, oh, the game is already so expensive, I might as well just pay a little bit more for the big collector's set. And I also just don't see this. I don't see that at all. Again, you have your core audience. That audience does exist. They will want to purchase the collector's edition, sure. But no, you don't try to play mind games with the audience to like trick them into getting the more expensive thing. No, you need to price your game to sell. You need to price it so that it will move cappies. And it's like I said, $70 already feels like too much for Fire Emblem. Now, to be fair, I've not played the game myself. Maybe it is much bigger and grander and has more content than I could ever imagine for a Fire Emblem game. But I don't know. From my perspective, this series is kind of on the smaller side. Just when you look at Nintendo's other really big series, this one is, I don't know, niche might be too strong a word, but like, it's close. Fortune's Weave looks like a really nice game. The visuals are pretty nice. It does sound like it's probably going to have a good amount of content, but just overall, it does not look like it has the highest budget. It does not give the impression of a $70 or $80 game to me. And I feel, and now we come to the thoughts part. I thoughts that, this might be the weirdest, kind of scariest thing that Nintendo has done in a good bit. At the very least, this generation. And you may think that's weird. You may be like, Arlo, Nintendo has done a whole bunch of crummy stuff this generation. How is this specific thing the scariest? It's because up until now, all the stuff that Nintendo has done, I've more or less understood, you know? That's not to say that I agree with all of their decisions or that I think they were good things to do. But yeah, like there's been a logic. Again, $80 for Mario Kart World. They probably thought everyone else was going to be upping prices. Yeah, just future-proofing, getting ahead of the game. I get it. Game key cards. It's getting really hard to fit these humongous games on these tiny, expensive proprietary cartridges. They wanted to give third parties an option to kind of help save on costs rather than having to just raise the prices of the games themselves. So again, it's kind of a crummy thing, but I do at least understand where they were coming from. And the overall higher prices, you know, $70 for most of their big games, raising the price of the original hardware and the accessories, and now raising the price of the Switch 2 itself. They're under such enormous pressure from investors. They want to maintain the crazy success of the original Switch. They want it to roll into Switch 2. It's not necessarily reasonable or sustainable, but again, I get it. That's just kind of how businesses work, especially with the Switch 2 selling so well. It's tracking above the original Switch in sales, so the investors are going to be like, yeah, but why aren't you making as much money? It's the unfortunate reality of capitalism. Nobody wants to make less money now than they did before. You gotta keep those numbers up. Keep the lines going up. Again, I don't like it, but I get it. I understand where they're coming from. But $80 dues for Fire Emblem? No, not get. Not getting is what is happening here. And I know I'm getting a little extreme here, but I might even go as far as to say this decision feels kind of unhinged. Is that too strong a word? Unhinged? Because that's how this feels to me. Especially because up until now, it seems like Nintendo has been trying to balance things out. You know, like they knew they had to raise prices somewhere, but they waited as long as they could before raising the price of the Switch 2. They raised the prices of like, you know, amiibo and accessories and stuff. And then more than anything, it's this like flexible game pricing thing. You know, like things were a little bit scary for a bit, but then they announced this like digital physical split, and then like some games were getting like kind of budget pricing. Like I made a whole entire video on it. It really it really spoke to a much more, just a more positive outlook for Nintendo. Okay, yeah, prices are going up in many areas, but look at that. They're willing to budge a little bit on price, be a little bit more competitive with games that are a little bit smaller. Splatoon Raiders, a relatively small spin-off. You can get it $50 digitally or $60 physically. Star Fox, same thing. It's clearly a much smaller game than many of their others. And yes, the prices are still relatively high for physical collectors, but you know, the digital option is at least there. It helps a little bit. And of course, we've kind of been wondering, okay, is this rewarding digital purchasers or punishing physical purchasers? Kind of depends on how you look at it, but at least up until now, that's been, it's I don't know, slightly nebulous, kind of arguable one way or the other. It's maintained something of a balance. This finally throws off that balance. Like, yes, absolutely, physical collectors are being punished. But people buying digitally aren't getting off that easy either. $70 is still a tremendous amount of money for a Fire Emblem game. I'm sorry, like, I'm sorry. Like, they're cool games. They are. It's just like, I think this whole flexible pricing thing has really, I don't know, it's made me consider all over again what games should be what price. Like, Splatoon is a huge, very, very popular series, sells many, many units, and Splatoon Raiders looks like a very, very good game. So why is that $50, $60? Like, why? Why is Splatoon Raiders $50 and $60 when Fire Emblem is $70 and $80? Within the Nintendo sphere, it's already completely ridiculous. But then when you zoom out and you look at the greater industry, this just becomes just a... I just don't even... Fortune's Weave releases this September. And I don't know if you've noticed, but there are a whole lot of video games being published this September. GTA 6 is hitting in November. Nobody wants to be anywhere close to that, so everybody is lumping everything into September all at the same time. There are so many games releasing, many very high profile, very expensive games that people are very much looking forward to. Let's go over a few here. Onimusha, Way of the Sword, humongous, beautiful, very high budget AAA game. You know how much that game is gonna be? $70, physical and digital. Sure, like pretty much all the games on this list, there's gonna be a more expensive, like, deluxe edition or whatever, but as usual, it is not a necessary purchase whatsoever. You want to play Onimusha this September, it's gonna be $70. Ace Combat 8, that is also a September release. It is also going to be $70 to purchase that video game. Marvel's Wolverine. Sony, do you have any idea how much money they've been spending on their first-party games? Do you have any idea? Hundreds of millions of dollars on their Spider-Man games. So yeah, I would not be surprised if Wolverine cost them $100 or $200 million as well. I don't know what kind of money Nintendo spends, but I would not be surprised if the budget of this game was many, many times higher than the budget of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. Massive AAA game. Everyone's really looking forward to it. Probably gonna sell a ton of copies. $70. Not 80. Could have been 80, but no, it's 70 because that's what you price AAA video games nowadays. At least for now. $70, even if you're purchasing physical. Oh, but I said it was a stacked month, and I mean it. There's a bunch more games coming out. What else we got here? We got Warhammer 40K Dawn of War 4. Okay, like this game does look very good. Yeah, that's probably also a smaller-ish, kind of a medium budget game. You know, definitely lower than Wolverine for sure. Okay, so $60. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable price. Even more, Control Resonant. Control Resonant is a very, very hotly anticipated AAA high-budget game. It is also releasing in September, and you know how much they're charging for it? The MSRP? $60, not even 70. They could have probably gotten away with 70, but they wanted to make sure that this game was priced competitively. They wanted to foster the series. They wanted to grow the series. They wanted to give their game a fighting chance against the rest of the crazy, crazy competition, so they priced it at 60. Even more, Silent Hill Townfall, another very hotly anticipated, very high production value kind of game, also releasing in September, and make sure you don't have any drink in your mouth at the moment because they're pricing this game at $50! $50! To purchase a physical copy of Silent Hill Townfall, it will be $30 fewer dollars than Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave. Now, I know that Nintendo, for the most part, doesn't really pay attention to the rest of the industry. You know, they don't even see most of the industry as competition. They feel like their own games fill their own special niches, and I do feel that in large part that's probably true. I do think they're kind of onto something, and the fact that they're not always just looking at the rest of the industry and copying what they do, that is kind of one of their strengths. But there does come a point when it's just like, okay, no, just no. It could perhaps be argued that Fire Emblem fans are not necessarily going to overlap with fans of these other big AAA series. Maybe they're not really strictly competition. Maybe those buying Wolverine were not going to buy Fire Emblem, and vice versa. Maybe, but I still can't help but feel like just marching into a just ridiculously stacked September. It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's gonna be an absolute bloodbath of video game releases. Just charging confidently right in there with a game that was probably made on a budget a fraction the size of probably all of these other games that you are launching on substantially weaker hardware and pricing the game higher than basically every other video game on the market. It's unhinged. It's completely unhinged. It is irrational. It is ridiculous. It goes against all of the goodwill that they finally started to generate with all of this more flexible kind of pseudo budget pricing. I ain't no businessman. I don't work at Nintendo, but I feel like it is just the perfect storm of both bad business and bad PR. There is no possible way that this price is gonna be good for Nintendo long term. There is no possible way that Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is gonna sell anything close to the amount that it would have sold with a more reasonable price point. That's gonna mean less money overall. That's gonna mean less growth for the series. And Nintendo's not really one to like drop prices down the line. So unless they wanna just, I don't know, swallow their pride and drop the price eventually if they realize that they killed the game at this price, yeah, I don't know, but we're probably stuck with this price. Yeah, we're probably stuck. Now, I will admit that, as always, I easily could be wrong. I absolutely could be wrong in this case. Maybe it's true that Fire Emblem fans will show up. Maybe it will, maybe it'll be a great game. Maybe this will be the best Fire Emblem game ever. Just like multiple times over. Maybe just like hundreds and hundreds of hours of content. Just a massive experience. And maybe we will see that reflected in the sales. Maybe the game will sell well after all. Maybe it'll even sell as well as Three Houses did. Oh, could you imagine? Arlo would be so wrong if that happened. But at least right now, I can't. I can't see that happening. It's funny because when you have a relatively low install base, you can kind of see it two ways. You know, there's a chance that a game will sell really well because the lower install base is made up of more hardcore fans who are more excited to just kind of play something on the system. You tend to see much higher attach rates earlier in a generation. Even relatively niche games can sell pretty darn well. People just looking for something cool to play. But then, of course, on the other hand, smaller install base means just fewer potential customers to reach. So right now with the Switch 2 only a year old, does that mean that people are more likely to buy Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave to have something cool to play on their Switch 2? Or does that just mean that few people who might possibly, potentially even be a Fire Emblem fan in the first place? If Engage sold poorly, relatively speaking, just because of the bad reviews, then yeah, maybe if Fortune's Weave ends up reviewing very, very well, then okay, things might be sorta alright. But again, for some hardcore fans at least, it's still gonna be hard to pay that price. And then anyone else who's just kind of on the fence about Fire Emblem, you know, maybe they haven't played one before, but they'd really like to try this one because it looks good. $70, $80 if you insist on buying physical, a lot of people do, then just no. Just absolutely not. It's just. Yeah. Right before wrapping up this video, Rockstar announced the price of GTA 6. And guess what? It's $80. $100 for the Ultimate Edition, but that just gives you access to some like exclusive cosmetics shops, but the standard edition of GTA 6, the biggest video game of all time, with a rumored budget of up to $1 billion, possibly the most expensive game ever produced 5 times over, will be $80. You go to the store, you see Fire Emblem and GTA 6 next to each other, same price. To be fair, GTA is a code in a box, okay, sure, but like, these two video games are still the same price. I don't know, man. So yeah, I don't know. It's just wild. It feels nonsensical to me. It feels so unnecessary. It feels so disruptive. And when you look at the greater context of the greater industry, it's just it's laughable. It's embarrassing. Like, Fortune's Weave costs more than Marvel's. What does Marvel's Wolverine? It costs more than DK Bonanza. Why? Why would you do that? And I don't know. It just also sets a kind of a scary precedent. It's just like now, we already had to be worried about the next $80 game, but like, we thought it would at least be something big. But now we gotta worried about the next, like, relatively niche game to be priced at 80? Like, that's a thing we gotta worry about now? Like, we weren't already worried enough? I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe this is just another experiment for Nintendo. Maybe even they are just not really sure how this will pan out. Whatever. I gotta go and get this video all done and uploaded and stuff so all the Fire Emblem fans can yell at me for calling their series niche. I'm sorry.